Yeah, welcome in. Welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. We got a pretty interesting show for you here today. We're going to talk a little NFL wide receiver wars, which is crazy because one of the wide receivers involved in this thing, well, he's been retired for a couple of years, and the other currently playing, Jerry Jeudy. Man, this is going to be a fun one. But before we get to that, you already know what time it is. If you're here on YouTube and you haven't already, please click that subscribe, that like, and that notification bell so you can be made aware anytime new content drops on the channel. If you're looking for the audio only version of the podcast, so you can hear that while you're working, while you're driving, whatever it may be, appreciate that too. Go ahead, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast. We should come right up. If you enjoy the content, please make sure you give us a 5-star review on your audio podcast platform, or give us that like on YouTube, and leave us a comment on both places. We love that. Helps us all rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. Let's get right to it. Okay, so this sports media thing is pretty cool, right? Especially in the modern day. You got people like me who actually went to journalism school. You got people who didn't, and all that's cool because there's room for everybody if you're willing to put the work in and try to be great at what you do. I guess like anything else, right? But we're seeing more and more former athletes who played their sport getting into the sports media. And that's cool because that can provide a level of insight that you're not going to get, again, from guys like me who didn't play, right? For instance, you guys know that every week during the college football season, I have my guy Ryan Langford on to discuss college football, give us some insight on his thoughts on things. Why? Because he played 4 years at the University of Illinois in the Big Ten, right? So we can talk college football. And he played 5 years in the professional leagues, a year in the NFL, as well as, multiple years in the Canadian Football League. So he can talk to us. If I have a question about wide receiver play, he can give me some nuance on that, right? He can tell me how to get in and out of a break. He can tell me, special teams things about a kick returner. He was an ace kick returner in the CFL, right? But anyway, this is why it's awesome to have that athlete perspective, right? So you get the journalists like myself who can look at it from the outside. You can get the athlete perspective who can give you things you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. Now, Steve Smith is, I want to call him an all-time great wide receiver. The guy's a borderline Hall of Famer, spent most of his career with the Carolina Panthers and then spent the last couple of years with the Baltimore Ravens. And he was known as being a super fiery competitor. I like to think he probably had a little bit of Napoleon complex thing going on, being a shorter guy, short, stout, but super tough and super productive over his career. And he may end up getting into the Hall of Fame one day, but right now, like I said, he's a borderline guy, right, in terms of his statistical production. But he's now working with, I believe, NFL Network, and he's talking college football, right? No, I'm sorry, not college football. He's talking NFL and covering this thing. And, again, it's kind of awesome because you have that inside perspective that guys like me and other journalists would not be able to provide. Great. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So Thursday night, he was on the pregame, or he was on the crew for the Broncos and Chiefs. And this is where he got into it. Well, this is where he put it out there that he and Jerry Jeudy, I guess, had a problem. So let's go ahead and listen to the clip and hear what Steve Smith had to say, and then we'll go from there.
Called out to him because on my podcast, Cut to It, I just talked about guys that maybe have not showed up in a way or in a manner. And so the word that I've used to describe him in the past was a jag, just a guy.
Just a guy.
When I saw him, he's playing well. I wanted to say to him face to face, like, hey, I know I said some things in the past I probably shouldn't have, and I'm sorry. That's what I wanted to say to him. His response, Mike Robb, was ninja.
Ninja?
Yes, I'm using the word ninja. I'm just using the word ninja. I don't mess with you. And it was a curse word. And so I was like, all right. And then he repeated it. So I'll say it again. I'm sorry that I said you were a jag, just a guy who's an average wide receiver they use a first-round pick on that isn't doing anything. I hope today that you actually show up in a way that you haven't showed up in the last couple of years since they drafted you. So if you ever got a problem with Agent 89, I'm sorry for saying that you're an average wide receiver that they eventually will move on. And when teams call me and asking, should they trade for you, I will say no, don't trade for Jerry Jeudy because he's mentally unable to handle constructive criticism from people who watch specifically, can he be a wide receiver? He could be a wide receiver. He's a tier 3. Go back into the studio. I'm done now. Thank you.
Wow. That was insane. See, and I didn't find out about this after the fact. I was actually watching the pregame show when this happened, and I was blown away. Like, Steve Smith put the absolute blowtorch to Jerry Jeudy. And me personally, I kind of liked it because he kept it 100, right? He told him exactly what it was. He didn't use any profanity and get too far out of line. But, you know, he let it be what it was going to be. And this was awesome because, let me say this. This was something that even people who aren't, you know, your typical sports fans were amused by and interested in, right? My wife, she was in the kitchen, you know, kind of straightening up after dinner. And I'm sitting on the couch and I'm watching this thing. And she's not a sports fan at all. She's not really into football. But I had it on the big screen TV and I'm watching this and I'm like, whoa. And she heard what Steve Smith had to say. She was like, wow. And, you know, immediately following that, she starts asking me questions like, who's Jerry Jeudy? What's the deal with him? Blah, blah, blah. You know, and so she even kind of enjoyed the interaction. And, you know, she wanted know a bit more about it. And stuff like that is really cool because it, in a way, it kind of helps to grow the game. Now, back to the Steve Smith, Jerry Jeudy thing. So I was blown away by this, right? So, you know, I remember watching Jerry Jeudy in college at Alabama. This is a guy who was 2-time first-team All-SEC. This is a guy who was at one point All-American. This is a guy who won the Biletnikoff Award for best wide receiver in college football. Of course, he won a national championship, I think 2017. So he had a heralded, outstanding collegiate career. Now, a lot of guys do. That doesn't mean they'll be a success on the NFL level, but he had a heralded, outstanding college career and was looked at as maybe being one of the best of the bunch coming out in his draft class. Outstanding route runner, outstanding hands, etc. Now, you go on and you say, okay, this is Jerry Jeudy's 4th season in the league, I believe. Let's take a look here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, this is his 4th season in the league. And we'll just say he's underwhelmed. Now, one of those years obviously was the pandemic year. That may have been his 2nd season. Anyway, I think one of those years was the pandemic year. And overall, let's just say this, in an era of the NFL where you're seeing more offensive statistical production than ever, he's never, as a supposedly #1 receiver, had 1,000 yards receiving. Let's see, he's played 16 games as a rookie, 10 games in his 2nd year, 15 games in his 3rd year, and he's played 5 games this year, okay? He's never had 1,000 yards. He's not on pace, it doesn't look like, to get 1,000 yards this season. He may, but the point is, we expected him, most of us coming out of college, to be an outstanding professional player, and he hasn't been that. He hasn't been that. Let's just be fair, right? And I guess his best year was his rookie year. 52 catches for 856 yards, 16.5 yards per catch. Now, the 16.5 yards per catch basically says he was a big play threat down the field, but the total 856 yards is leaves a bit to be desired, right? And especially now, I don't know if this is a product of his quarterback or a product of himself. He only caught 52 catches out of 113 targets. And as you can tell, that's well less than 50%. And that's substandard for a guy who's supposed to be as good as he was. Now, last year, in the midst of one of the worst seasons in Broncos history, he did have 972 receiving yards, 14.5 yards per catch, but the Broncos were absolutely terrible. And this is with Russell Wilson, who prior to coming to Denver, and that's a whole different story, was pretty much wrapped up to be a Hall of Famer. Now, I've often questioned, quick side note, I've often questioned, as good as Russell Wilson has been, was he really as good as we believe? Because his greatest success, obviously, in Seattle was when the Legion of Boom, that elite defense featuring Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and all those guys, was at its absolute peak, the best scoring defense in the league. I think the best rushing defense, best defense overall. One of the all-time great defenses, right? You're talking Legion of Boom, you're talking 2000 Ravens, 86 Bears, those kind of teams. If you want to even go back further, I'd want to say right at the end of the 70s, the Blitz Grits in Atlanta. Now, I think they only played 14 games, but that defense was incredible. And I want to say they only allowed like 10 points a game or something like that. I'll have to look that up, but they were crazy and really don't get the credit that they deserve. This is shout out to my man, Tall Man, who put me on to that years ago, Blitz Grits. Anyway, Grit Splits, sorry. But back to the Jerry Jeudy thing. This guy was supposed to be super, super elite. And so you wonder what's going on there. So anyway, Steve Smith, I guess on his podcast, as he mentioned, talked about Jerry Jeudy, and he called him a jag, just a guy. And he mentioned that in the clip that we played earlier. And, Steve Smith is going to keep it 100. And he has all right to critique wide receiver play, because as we mentioned, he's a guy who's a borderline Hall of Famer, and he was a great, great one. So he called him a jag, but he says, okay, I've seen him improve, whatever. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to man up and apologize for that. And Jerry Jeudy did not take it well. And so you heard Steve Smith absolutely flambé this dude. And personally, I loved it because it was entertaining. And too often we hear guys who just don't want to tell the truth about stuff, right? We've talked about Dak Prescott and the inordinate amount of love that he gets. We've talked about the overvaluing of Micah Parsons, as great as he is, comparing him to some dudes that they probably shouldn't, especially in a league where he's not even definitively the best pass rusher of his era, right? So to hear a guy, come out and say what it is, I thought was incredible. And if you're going to be real, like, why would you have any problems? Because we've heard some people say they have issue with what Steve Smith said and how he handled that. But why would you have any problems? Was he verbally abusive? No. Was he profane? No. Did he say anything about Jerry Jeudy that's not true? No, right? So obviously, and I didn't know this, I guess teams call guys like Steve Smith and ask, hey, what's your take on wide receiver X? Do you think we should trade for him? And he says, hey, this is not a guy that can handle constructive criticism. No, don't bring him in your locker room. So I think it was totally interesting. I think it was entertaining. I think it's good for the game on the entertainment standpoint. Not that the NFL really needs any help, because as we know, they're by far the most popular league in the United States. Football, of course, is our game. But anyway, yeah, I thought it was super cool. It was entertaining. I enjoyed it. I thought there was nothing wrong with it. I thought Steve Smith Sr. told the truth, and I got no problem with it. Now, here's the thing. Jerry Jeudy, he's all upset about that. He's got his panties in a bunch. Ninja, I don't mess with you. And of course, that's not what he said. That's the sanitized version. But if you're Jerry Jeudy, all you had to do was go out there and show out and prove Steve Smith wrong. And you didn't do that. I mean, that would have been the easiest answer, right? So instead, you go out there and you get 3 catches for 14 yards, 4.7 yards per catch. Really? That's not the way you shut Steve Smith up. Really, all you did was go out there and prove him right. So anyway, what I want to know from you is, what do you think of Steve Smith Sr.'s comments? Do you think they were warranted? Do you think they were true? Do you think he should have handled it a different way? What do you think of Jerry Jeudy's response to Steve Smith Sr. When Steve Smith Sr. attempted to man up and go apologize to him? Leave your comments in the comment section. Love to hear that. I'll respond to them as quickly as I can. And I'll be back with you next episode. And I'm out. Peace.